Cool. I'm Summer May Finlay, a Yotta Yotta woman, and we're here with Richard Weston at the 2nd National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Suicide Prevention Conference. And you guys have just launched this fabulous report. Do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself and then a little bit about the report?
Well, I'm CEO of the Healing Foundation, but my people are from the Torres Strait. I'm a Meriam man. I grew up, actually, we're in Noongar Butcher today, so it's very pleasing because this is where I grew up. I was born on Gadigal country in Sydney, so I'm one of those people that have travelled all over the country, and now I'm based in Canberra with the Healing Foundation. And today we did launch Stories from Community, how suicide rates fell into Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and it was with the communities we're talking about are the Tiwi Islands and Yarrabah in Queensland.
Fantastic. And so they're two really strong communities, and they're communities I know about now as being strong. So to give you context, in the 90s, I'm an 81 baby. So it's really interesting for me to hear the story of what was and now to know where they are. Can you talk us through some of the journey that they went through and how they've gone from having those high suicide rates to actually being really strong communities now?
Well, that's what this report tells. It tells the story of these two communities when they had epidemics of suicide back in the early to mid 90s, and they were struggling to deal with them because they didn't understand the problem, and they were trying very hard to work out what to do, and they weren't getting any assistance from mainstream health services and government and other providers because they didn't know what to do either. So what communities did, they went back to their traditional ways of doing things. They came together in their communities, and in a place like Yarrabah, we've got 4,000 people. They came together, they had a meeting, they had a community meeting, and that community meeting has been etched into their community history. There's a plaque that commemorates that particular gathering, and that was where they decided what they would do. So they decided to take ownership of the problem, they took responsibility for dealing with it, and they went from there, and they built a primary health care system, they built a family wellbeing program, and they built a suicide prevention program that they started with 2 life promotion officers, so they didn't even talk about them as being suicide prevention, but as life promotion. And they couldn't get any funding for those positions from government, and they got the money from, of all places, a pharmaceutical company in the UK, which gave them the seed funding to do it. And they've just kept going from strength to strength. But what that story is about is how communities took ownership. They took responsibility. They worked out what they were going to do, and then they went ahead and did it. They didn't seek permission from anybody else. And I think that's one of the great learnings from this work. And unfortunately, what brought them to that point of standing up and doing that was suicide, a crisis in suicide. But communities don't have to wait for those crises. And the similar story occurred in the Tiwi, but their response was different. They organised themselves along their 4 skin groups, and that's what they had. They had what they call a skin group meeting, and they continue to have those skin group meetings which bring the community together. They have agreements with organisations in their communities that people are released for those meetings. But back in the early mid 90s, they were responding to suicide crises, and they did a range of things to tackle it, but it came out of their culture. So they did practical things, like they put guards on light poles to stop young people climbing up and hanging themselves. So, but they started conversations with their young people. They started to wrap around them and support them. And they spoke today very much about strength of family and love. And, these are things you can't get those from mainstream providers. That's not, these solutions come from within our communities. And I've seen, even in my own experience working in Far West New South Wales, I've seen communities come up with very sophisticated, very elegant solutions to very difficult problems to solve. And if we put our faith back in our culture and our history, our wisdom, and support our communities, so organisations like the Healing Foundation, for example, we're not a problem solver. We're not going to go into communities and tell them what to do and direct them with what to do. What we will do is provide technical support, maybe some resources. We'll help them understand the problem better, maybe get some experts in to help advise, but it's up to communities to do it, and that's what comes out of these two stories, these communities standing up, taking action, and dealing with problems. And they've still had problems over the years. They haven't, suicide never left the community, but as they've gone on over time, they've become more resilient, more stronger. And just like we were able to do thousands of years ago when we had a problem or an upset in the community, we had the strength to deal with it. We had the ability to heal those traumas and move on. And that's what these communities are reclaiming. They're reclaiming their strength, they're reclaiming their culture, and they're reclaiming their own ways of healing and dealing with challenges. And there's lessons in here for this conference, for people attending here. And really it is about communities taking action. It doesn't cost anything for anyone in a community to have a meeting. No. All we have to do is start, and that's where it can start. And I think there's been a number of examples here, even outside of the Tiwi and Yarrabah, where people have started coming together, networking, talking about problems, and it's just led from one thing to another. So, and I think that's a common theme in this conference. It's about community-led solutions. It's about our culture, strengthening our identities, and taking up responsibility and taking ownership.
So, because we were talking before, was that, you can't pick up any one solution and dump it on another community, but there's some common things that you were raising, which is around communities taking the leadership, communities actually determining for themselves what they need, and then actioning that.
Well, that's what these communities said. They can't pick up what's going on in Tiwi and make it happen in Yarrabah. That's not what the presentations were about today. They would tell that what emerges is a number of themes, and that's what you're talking about there. There's some themes there where communities, draw on their cultural wisdom. They demonstrate leadership. They problem solve and they work, but they come together and work together. Those are common themes, but every community is different. And the strong message out of Yarrabah and Tiwi was every community has to have their own solution. It has to be designed to deal with local issues. It has to be based on local cultural protocols. There needs to be leadership in the community, and all communities can do those things. And when those things come together, communities can design and develop and deliver their own solutions.
Fantastic. So this is available on your website?
Yeah, we've got it's on our website. People can order hard copies from the foundation, but look, encourage everybody to read it. I mean, these stories are so uplifting, they're so inspiring, and they tell us that we can do it, and regardless of the challenges we have, because many of the things that led to these suicide epidemics are steeped in the history of colonisation, the genocidal practices and policies of Australian governments since they got here. But these communities have shown that we can beat these issues. We can beat the legacy of colonisation. We can create healing. We can create leadership. Keep our children safe, and we can, grow up a new, healthy, safe generation.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
I did that. That was a deliberate mistake. But really good to be at this conference and with people from all over Australia, really coming solutions focused.
Yep.
A lot of inspiring stories, a lot of great connections being made, and we're morphing into an international conference over the last couple of days, which is exciting, and lots to share. Great to see First Nations people sharing solutions.
Absolutely.
Thank you.